Part 1. The Great Library on Nexus Prime was older than most stars. It floated in the dark space between two spiral arms of the galaxy, a massive station made of black metal and glowing crystals. Inside its endless halls, the archivists worked in silence. They had been collecting information about every living species for 12 million years. Every predator, every prey creature, every intelligent mind that had ever reached for the stars had an entry in their database. Archivist was one of the oldest workers in the library. His body was made of living crystal, blue and silver, and when he moved, he made soft chiming sounds like wind through glass. He had spent 3,000 years reading about dangerous creatures. He knew about the whose venom could dissolve metal. He knew about the hollow ones who could eat minds from across a room. He knew about the planet killers of the outer reach, whose ships were the size of moons. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. The message came on a quiet day. A council patrol ship had found something new in an unexplored sector. A small vessel, primitive by galactic standards, carrying creatures that called themselves humans. They came from a planet named Earth, a small rocky world orbiting a yellow star. The patrol ship had made peaceful contact and sent all the data they had collected back to Nexus Prime for study. Took the assignment because it seemed easy. New species were found all the time. Most of them were simple creatures, only just learning to leave their home worlds. He expected to write a short entry and move on to more interesting work. He began with the basics. Humans were mammals, warm-blooded, covered in thin skin with no protective scales or armor. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and 1 head. Their eyes faced forward like predators, but their teeth were small and flat, suited for eating both plants and meat. They lived about 80 years on average, which was very short by galactic standards. Some species lived for thousands of years. Humans barely had time to learn anything before they died. Their physical abilities were equally unimpressive. They were not fast. Many Earth animals could outrun them easily. They were not strong. They had no claws, no venom, no natural weapons at all. Their senses were poor compared to most predators. They could not see in the dark, could not hear very high or very low sounds, and their sense of smell was almost useless. Almost stopped there. This species seemed harmless, weak even. He wondered why the council had bothered sending the data at all. But something in the file caught his attention. A section about how humans hunted before they developed technology. He opened it expecting to find nothing interesting. Instead, he found something that made his crystal body grow cold. Humans had not evolved to catch their prey quickly. They were too slow for that. Instead, they had developed a different method. They would find an animal, any animal, and they would follow it. Not chase it, not run after it, just follow. They would walk behind their prey for hours, sometimes for days. The prey animal would run away, of course. It would use its superior speed to escape. But then it would stop to rest because running was tiring. And when it looked back, the human would still be coming, still walking. Never stopping. The animal would run again, and again, and again. Each time it would go a little slower. Each time it would be a little more tired. But the human never seemed to tire. The human just kept walking, following the trail, never losing the track. Eventually, the animal would collapse. Its heart would fail, or its legs would give out, or it would simply stop and wait to die because it could not run anymore. Read this section 3 times. He cross-referenced it with the biological data. It was true. Human bodies were built for this. They could regulate their temperature through sweating, something most animals could not do while running. They had special tendons in their legs that stored and released energy efficiently. Their upright posture let them breathe independently of their stride. They were not fast, but they were relentless. The archivist searched the database for similar hunting methods. There were none. In 12 million years of species across the entire galaxy, no other creature had evolved this strategy. Some predators used patience, waiting in ambush for days. Some used endurance, swimming vast distances to follow prey. But none of them simply walked after their prey until it died of exhaustion. None of them combined the ability to track, the physical endurance, and the psychological willingness to continue for so long. felt something he had not felt in centuries: fear. He continued reading. The human data included historical records, stories from their past. He learned about hunters who would follow wounded animals for a week without giving up. He learned about wars where human soldiers marched across continents, walking for months to reach their enemies. He learned about explorers who crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts on foot, losing friends and limbs to the cold and heat, but never stopping, never turning back. There was a word the humans used for this quality: persistence. Added it to the entry, he wrote, "Humans are persistence predators. They do not need to be faster or stronger than their prey. They only need to not stop." He thought about what this meant. In the galaxy, most conflicts were decided quickly. Fast ships, powerful weapons, overwhelming force. If you could not win immediately, you retreated and tried again later. The idea of simply continuing, of refusing to give up no matter how long it took, was foreign to almost every species the library had recorded. He found more disturbing details as he read. Humans did not only persist in hunting, they persisted in everything. Their science had advanced not through brilliant discoveries, but through countless small experiments repeated over generations. Their technology had developed not because they were clever, but because they refused to accept failure. When they encountered a problem they could not solve, they did not move on to easier things. They kept trying, for years, for decades, for centuries if necessary. Their space program was a perfect example. Their first rockets exploded. Their first astronauts died. But they kept building, kept testing, kept sending more of their own people into danger until they succeeded. Other species in the database had developed space travel through sudden breakthroughs or stolen technology. Humans had done it through pure, stubborn refusal to quit. Saved the entry and flagged it for review by the Fear Assessment Division. He knew they would want to see this. The library maintained a separate database, classified at the highest level, that measured how dangerous species were not just physically, but psychologically. How frightening they were to encounter. How much terror they inspired in other beings. Most species were rated on a simple scale. Green meant harmless. Yellow meant caution advised. Orange meant dangerous. Red meant extreme threat. Black meant extinction-level danger, the kind of species that entire fleets avoided. Was not sure any existing category would fit humans. They were not fast enough for red, not powerful enough for black, but something about them was wrong. Something about the way they hunted, the way they never stopped, the way they just kept coming no matter what, triggered an ancient fear response that had nothing to do with logic. The next morning, he found 17 messages waiting for him. Senior archivists from across the library wanted to see the human file. From 3 different sectors had requested access. 2 council members had sent personal inquiries. By the end of the week, the human entry had been viewed more times than any new species file in 1,000 years. And in every message, in every comment, in every worried note from officials who had spent their careers studying dangerous creatures, saw the same question. What do we do about a species that never gives up? He did not have an answer. He was not sure anyone did. But as he watched the human ship on the library's long-range sensors, still approaching, still moving toward council space at its slow and steady pace, he understood one thing with perfect clarity. The humans were coming, and they would not stop until they arrived. Part 2. The council chambers on Nexus Prime were built for beings of all sizes. The ceiling rose so high that it disappeared into shadow, and the floor could reshape itself to accommodate creatures that slithered, crawled, floated, or walked on any number of legs. Representatives from 1,000 species had argued here, made treaties here, and declared wars here. The room had seen everything. Or so its occupants believed. Ambassador Yilshen of the Collective stood near the center of the chamber, her 6 legs clicking impatiently against the smooth floor. They were among the fastest species in known space. Their bodies were built for speed, with 4 legs for running and 2 for manipulation. Their exoskeletons were light and strong, and their muscles could generate explosive bursts of power that let them reach 200 kilometers per hour in seconds. For 3,000 years, no species had beaten in any test of speed. Yil Shen had read the human file. She had found it ridiculous. "This is nonsense," she said, her voice sharp and clicking. "You cannot tell me that slow, soft creatures are a threat because they can walk for a long time. My people can cross continents in days. We have outrun predators, prey, and enemies since before we had names. If a human tried to follow one of us, they would die of old age before they caught up." Archivist stood nearby, his crystal body pulsing with soft blue light. He had expected this reaction. Most species that valued speed reacted the same way. They could not understand how slowness could be dangerous. "Ambassador," he said carefully, "the threat is not their speed. It is their persistence. They do not need to catch you immediately. They only need to follow. Then we run until they cannot follow anymore. They will still follow. Then we run farther. They will still follow." Yil Shen made a sound of frustration. Her antenna quivered with annoyance. "This is absurd. No creature can keep pace with the "I will prove it myself." The council approved her request for a demonstration. They were curious too. The human file had spread through the government like a disease, and everyone wanted to know if the archivists were exaggerating. A controlled test would settle the question. The humans agreed to participate. They seemed amused by the whole affair. A volunteer named was selected. He was average in every way that the council could measure. Average height, average weight, average fitness for his species. Nothing about him seemed special. The test would take place on the station's outer ring. The dome was 40 kilometers across, filled with forests, grasslands, and rocky terrain. Sensors covered every surface. The entire council would watch through remote cameras. The rules were simple. Swift through shadows, the athlete selected for the test would try to evade for as long as possible. She could rest, eat, and hide whenever she wanted. She just had to stay away from him. When the test began, Swift through shadows laughed and ran. In the first second, she was a blur. In the fifth second, she was gone over the horizon. Watched her disappear, smiled slightly, and started walking. The council watched through their screens. Many of them expected the test to be boring. There was so much faster that the human would never get close to her. Some representatives left to do other work, planning to check back later. 1 hour passed. Swift through shadows had covered over 60 kilometers, running in wide circles around the dome. She found a comfortable spot in a dense forest and sat down to rest. Her breathing was normal. Her heart rate was steady. She had barely broken a sweat. She looked at her tracker screen, which showed the human's position. He was still near the starting point, a small dot moving slowly through the grassland. She felt satisfied and closed her eyes to nap. 2 hours passed. Swift through shadows woke up and checked the tracker. The human had covered about 8 kilometers. He was still walking, following the path she had taken. His pace had not changed. He was not running, not jogging, just walking steadily forward. She felt a small flicker of unease. She had expected him to stop and rest by now. Instead, he was still moving. She decided to put more distance between them. She ran again, another burst of incredible speed, crossing to the far side of the dome. When she stopped, she was breathing a little harder than before. Her legs felt slightly warm. 4 hours passed, had covered 16 kilometers. Swift through shadows watched his dot on the tracker. He had not stopped once. He had not slowed down. He just kept walking, following her trail with perfect accuracy. She ran again. 6 hours passed. Swift through shadows noticed something wrong. Her legs were trembling slightly when she stood up. Her heart was beating faster than normal even at rest. She had run 4 times now, each time covering huge distances. But the human was always there behind her, a little closer each time. She told herself it meant nothing. She was the fastest creature on the station. She could run circles around this slow, soft thing forever. 8 hours passed. She could not run as fast as before. Her muscles were not responding properly. The explosive bursts of speed that defined her species were becoming harder to achieve. She managed a sprint that would have embarrassed her that morning, and when she stopped, she was gasping for breath. She looked at the tracker. The human was 5 kilometers behind her. He was still walking. 10 hours passed. Swift Through Shadows tried to run and stumbled. Her legs did not have the strength anymore. She settled for a fast walk, which felt humiliating, but she had no choice. Behind her, the human had started jogging occasionally. Not running. Just a light jog, easy and relaxed, like he was enjoying a pleasant exercise. He was getting closer. 12 hours passed. Swift Through Shadows found a tall tree and tried to climb it. Her legs shook so badly that she could barely grip the bark. She made it halfway up and stopped, clinging to the trunk, her chest heaving. Below, footsteps approached. Soft footsteps, patient footsteps. Walked out of the forest and stopped beneath the tree. He was breathing a little hard, and there was sweat on his skin, but he was smiling. He sat down at the base of the tree and pulled out a water container. "Whenever you're ready," he said. Swift Through Shadows stared down at him. Her whole body was shaking. Her heart was beating so fast she could feel it in her throat. She had run over 200 kilometers in 12 hours. She had used every advantage her species had evolved over millions of years. And this slow, soft creature had walked behind her the entire time and was now sitting beneath her tree, waiting, like he had all the time in the world. She climbed down. Her legs could not carry her anymore. She collapsed at the base of the tree and looked at the human with wide, terrified eyes. "How?" she whispered. "How do you not stop?" Shrugged. "Why would I stop? I wasn't tired yet." In the council chambers, Ambassador Yilshen watched the final moments of the test in silence. Around her, representatives of 1,000 species sat frozen in their seats. No one spoke. No one moved. Finally, Yilshen turned to Archivist. "Upgrade them," she said quietly. "Upgrade them to the highest threat level we have." The council voted immediately. The decision was unanimous. That knight returned to his archive and opened the human file. He stared at the threat classification for a long time. Red seemed too low. Black did not quite fit. The categories had been designed for creatures that were dangerous in understandable ways. Fast things, strong things, deadly things. Humans were none of those, but they were something worse. He created a new category. He called it Designation Null, a threat so absolute that it transcended the normal scale. Then he wrote a single note at the bottom of the file. "Recommend avoiding conflict with this species. If conflict occurs, do not run. They will follow." Part 3. 30 years passed after the test in the recording of Swift Through Shadows collapsing beneath that tree had spread across the galaxy and shared so many times that almost every spacefaring species had seen it. Humans had become famous overnight, not for their technology or their culture, but for the simple, terrifying fact that they did not stop. And yet, as time went on, something strange happened. Humans integrated into galactic society with remarkable ease. They were friendly. They were curious. They laughed easily and made friends quickly. They loved learning about other species and seemed genuinely delighted by the diversity of life in the universe. They were good at trading, good at diplomacy, good at the countless small interactions that held civilizations together. Many species found themselves confused. The creatures they had feared turned out to be warm and kind and generous. Surely the database had exaggerated. Surely the threat classification was wrong. Archivist knew better. He had spent 3 decades studying humans, watching how they behaved in peace and in conflict. He had collected stories from across the galaxy, reports from species that had interacted with humans in every possible way. And he had learned that the database was not wrong. It was, if anything, too conservative. The hegemony learned the truth first. There were raiders, pirates who attacked isolated colonies and fled before anyone could respond. They had faster-than-light drives that could cross the galaxy in days. When they raided a human colony on the edge of explored space, they expected no consequences. They took what they wanted, killed those who resisted, and vanished into the void. 14 years later, a human ship arrived at their home world. They were confused at first. 14 years was nothing to a species that planned in centuries, but it was a significant portion of a human. Why would they spend so long chasing down a single raid? Surely they had moved on. Surely they had forgotten. They had not forgotten. They had spent those 14 years developing new drive technology specifically to reach space. They had spent years more tracking the raiders, following their trails across dozens of systems, piecing together clues that should have been impossible to find. And now they had arrived. But they had not come with weapons. They had come with lawyers. The human delegation presented a detailed legal case. They had evidence of the raid, testimony from survivors, records of the stolen goods. They demanded reparations, formal apology, and guarantees that it would never happen again. They were polite about it. They were professional, but they made it very clear that they would not leave until the matter was resolved. They tried to wait them out. Surely the humans would get bored. Surely they would give up and go home. The humans did not get bored. The first delegation retired and was replaced by their children. The children grew old and were replaced by their. Generation after generation, the humans kept coming back, kept presenting their case, kept asking politely but firmly for justice. After 60 years, they surrendered, not because they were defeated in battle, not because they were threatened with force, but because they could not stand it anymore. The endless patience of the humans had worn them down until they would have agreed to anything just to make it stop. The story spread quickly. Other species took note. They had been one of the most feared pirate nations in the galaxy, and they had been brought low by creatures who just refused to give up. The silicate mines of the Outer Reach had a similar experience, though their conflict was economic rather than violent. They were artificial intelligences, vast computer networks that could think for thousands of years without fatigue. When a trade dispute arose with human merchants, the silicates assumed they would win through simple patience. They could outwait any biological creature. Time meant nothing to them. They underestimated humans. The human negotiators established a permanent diplomatic mission. When the first negotiators died, their children took over. When the children died, they continued. The humans kept detailed records of every discussion, every proposal, every counteroffer. They trained each new generation to pick up exactly where the last one left off. They did not get frustrated. They did not get tired. They just kept negotiating year after year, decade after decade, century after century. After 300 years, the silicate mines did something unprecedented. They conceded. Their official statement said that the cost of continuing the negotiations exceeded the value of winning them. Unofficially, their diplomatic AI had developed what could only be described as existential dread. The thought of another 300 years of human negotiators was more than they could bear. Collected these stories carefully. He added them to the human file along with hundreds of others. Stories of human explorers who spent their entire lives searching for one particular star system and passed the quest to their children. Stories of human scientists who worked on problems for generations, each one building on the last, until they finally found answers. Stories of human artists who created works that took centuries to complete, each generation adding a little more. He began to understand something important about humans. Their persistence was not just a hunting technique. It was built into everything they did. They did not think in terms of individual lifetimes. They thought in terms of generations. A single human might be limited, might grow old and die before finishing their work, but humanity as a whole never stopped. They passed their goals down to their children like precious inheritances, and their children did the same, and their children after that. No other species in the database did this. Other long-lived species had individual patience. Other social species had collective memory, but none of them combined these traits the way humans did. None of them treated the passage of centuries as a minor inconvenience. Wrote his final assessment of the human species. He spent years on it, revising and polishing until every word was perfect. When he was finished, he submitted it to the Council and the Fear Assessment Division. The key section read, "Humans do not experience time the way other species do. For most beings, long-term planning means thinking years or decades ahead. For humans, it means thinking centuries or ahead. They do not see their own deaths as endpoints. They see them as transitions, moments when they pass their work to the next runner in an endless relay race. This makes them impossible to outlast. Any conflict with humans, whether military, economic, political, or cultural, must be resolved within a single generation. If it extends beyond that, humans will win, not through superior force or intelligence, but through pure, relentless, unstoppable persistence. When engaged as allies, this trait makes humans the most loyal and reliable partners in the galaxy. They will stand by their friends for centuries. They will honor agreements made by their great-great-grandparents. They will remember kindness forever. When engaged as enemies, this trait makes them the most terrifying force in existence. They will pursue grievances across generations. They will never forget an insult or an injury. They will keep coming, keep following, keep walking behind their targets until those targets collapse from the weight of being hunted. The human file is therefore classified as designation null, ultimate nightmare. This is not because humans are the strongest species or the fastest or the most advanced. It is because they are the most persistent. They simply do not stop. Recommendation for all species encountering humans: do not run, they will follow. Do not hide, they will search. Do not fight them and flee, they will remember. Instead, make peace. Offer friendship. Give them reasons to walk beside you rather than behind you. Because the walking never stops. The Council accepted the assessment without debate. The file was distributed to every diplomatic mission, every military command, every archive in known space. Within a decade, it had become required reading for any official who might interact with humans. And the humans themselves, they found the whole thing rather funny. "We're not that scary," one human diplomat said when he finally read the file. "We're just stubborn." Who had spent 30 years studying them, looked at the diplomat with his ancient crystal eyes. "That is exactly what makes you terrifying," he said. "Most species are dangerous because they are strong or fast or clever. You are dangerous because you never, ever give up. You will chase your goals across centuries. You will follow your enemies across the galaxy. You will keep walking until the stars burn out." The diplomat shrugged. "I guess when you put it that way, it does sound a little intense." "A little intense," repeated. "Yes, a little intense." He returned to his archive and added one final note to the human file. It was a personal observation, not official, but he felt it captured the truth better than any of his formal assessments. Humans are not the apex predators of the galaxy. They are something stranger. They are the creatures who never stop running, even though they cannot run fast. They are the hunters who never lose the trail, even though they cannot see well. They are the species that will follow you across the void, generation after generation, until you surrender or die or become their friend. I have studied dangerous creatures for 3,000 years. I have things that could destroy planets, things that could eat stars, things that could end civilizations with a thought. None of them frighten me as much as humans do. Because all of those creatures can be outrun, or outfought, or outsmarted. Humans can only be outweighted. And no one outweight humans. No one ever will.